surely I can't be the only one who wished Pua had stowed away on the boat instead of Hey Hey. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about Disney's 2016 animated musical fantasy adventure, Moana. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content, like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. Moana stars the vocal talents of Auliʻi Cravalho, Dwayne Johnson, and Rachel House, and was co-directed by John Musker and Ron Clements. Set in ancient Polynesia, it tells the story of a teenager who sets out on a nautical journey in order to find a demigod who can help break the curse on our island. As much as we crave originality in movies, formulas are the bread and butter of filmmaking. Sometimes these formulas are more obvious than other times, but when you watch a lot of movies, you start to recognize and pick up on them. There are formulas for films in specific genres, for certain franchises, for various target demographics, and even for studios. Animation studios like Disney and Pixar repeatedly utilize some of the most easily recognizable formulas out there. Nearly all Disney films follow some sort of tried and true formula. There are a few different ones that they select from, depending on the type of story and the protagonist, but a very commonly used one is that of a coming-of-age heroic journey with a bit of magical realism. And one of the most popular subsets of this particular formula is the story of a teenage girl wishing to break free from the expectations and confines of her life, rebelling against and disobeying a protective parent, usually a father in the process. We've seen this formula used over and over again. The Little Mermaid, Pocahontas, Mulan, Tangled. Throw in some catchy songs and a cute animal sidekick, and you've got yourself a Disney animated hit. So what about Moana? Adventurous, free-spirited teenage girl? Check. Overprotective father? Check. Rebellious coming-of-age journey? Check. Catchy music? Check. Cute animal sidekick? Check and check. Even though Moana is quite literally checking all the boxes, I should note that formulas aren't inherently a bad thing. They're followed for a reason, after all. They work. Many people don't even notice when a film follows a formulaic pattern, and even when they do, sometimes they don't care, because it's delivering something they like and want. And Moana is a film that falls into that latter category. For me, the formula really stands out at times, much more so than most other films in Disney's revival era. It's a story that feels like an amalgamation of other Disney films that I like more, but at the same time, all those familiar elements here aren't bad. They're just expected and predictable, but in an enjoyable way. Disney is really good at taking well-used scaffolding and applying a new skin over it to make it seem brand new. Yes, there's plenty here that we've seen before in other films, but Moana does introduce some slightly different elements. Refreshingly, there's no love story subplot, as we've often seen in these types of films, but more obvious is the unique setting. We have had one film in Hawaii before, with Lilo and Stitch, but the ancient Polynesia setting here gives us some insight into a different culture's history and mythology. It's well researched and both affectionately and respectfully incorporated into the film. Even the voice casting follows this trend, with most of the actors being of Polynesian descent. So while Moana is a story made up of very familiar pieces, it has enough differences and unique aspects to make it feel like a fresh world within an obviously Disney universe. Unsurprisingly, this film is stylistically similar to other CG animated films of Disney's revival era. The tropical setting certainly lends itself to some very lush and colorful animation, with the background environments and textured elements like hair and water being especially beautifully animated. Character designs are a bit smooth and rounded, opting for a more cartoonish look than some of the studio's more photorealistic ventures. I'll admit that the animation style here isn't a personal favorite of mine, but it's impressive nonetheless. Of particular note on the character design side of things is Maui, specifically his living tattoos. These are a series of moving, interactive 2D images, which feel a bit nostalgically reminiscent of the Muses from Hercules. At least the sequences in which they're confined to pottery or frescoes. Like the animation, the music here is also impressive and representative of this era of Disney animation, but once again, not a personal favorite of mine. Lin-Manuel Miranda's style works here, and I could definitely see why so many people love the music from this one. It's pleasant enough, but I have to say that the only song that's ever been catchy enough to stick with me beyond the film's runtime is You're Welcome. Despite its ancient setting, Moana is a very modern Disney film, incorporating the best and the worst of the studio's formula system. What you personally consider to be those best and worst parts will vary, but for me, this movie ends up being a very pleasant mixed bag. It's got a number of things that I genuinely enjoy, but also more than a few eye-rolling or distractingly formulaic elements as well. Perhaps if I was younger when it came out and had the benefit of growing up with it, much like my coming-of-age rebellious female empowerment movie Mulan, I would consider it the masterpiece that I know so many others do. And I get it. I know what it's like to have a Disney movie like that. So even if this one isn't that for me, I'm glad it is for others. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number one is the cultural representation. In recent years, both Disney and Pixar have been doing a pretty good job of incorporating different cultures into their stories, and focusing on protagonists who historically have never really been the protagonist in major animated films. This is a long overdue trend that I have personally really enjoyed. And although Disney had previously put out a couple films along these lines, I would argue that Moana was the movie that really kicked things off and made this almost the new standard. Now, I'm obviously not of Polynesian descent, so I can't speak to the authenticity of some of the cultural elements on display in this film, and I'm sure it has some errors and issues, but I really appreciate this movie's incorporation of Polynesian culture. From the historical elements like wayfinding to the mythological elements like Maui himself, this movie was able to showcase a very unique and previously not widely represented on film culture in an accessible and creative way. The second pro is the animation. Since the advent of Disney's revival era, almost every new film that the studios put out has been an impressive step forward for animation. Almost every time, we're greeted with phenomenal imagery that even 30 years ago we couldn't have imagined would be possible. So it's unsurprising that the animation ends up on the pro side here. It's lush, it's colorful, it's vibrant and full of life. The background environments, starry constellation-filled skies, and especially the water are the highlights of the animation in this one for me. I do like the character designs as well, but something about the particular style used in this film has always struck me as a bit more cartoonish than I would have liked. Even so, it's certainly not something I can knock the film for. On the con side, the biggest issue has got to be the juvenile elements. Now, I know what some people are going to say. This is a kids movie. Of course it's juvenile. We could obviously get into a discussion about the medium of animation not only being exclusively for kids, but even with the Disney's only for kids mindset, I would argue that the more juvenile parts of this film stick out from the rest of the story. Maybe it's because the blueprint of the formula for this movie stands out so much more to me than normal here, but some of the goofy moments on Moana's Island, the Kakamora, and even much of the slapstick comedy with Hey Hey just feel like they were inserted as an afterthought to get a cheap laugh out of young kids. I know the studio and the writers of this film are capable of crafting much better comedy, so it's just a little disappointingly eye-rolling to me at times here. The second con is how formulaic the film is. So this is definitely a less significant issue for me, and probably something that's more appropriately categorized as a mixed element. I discussed it in the body of the review, but basically every single Disney film always follows some sort of formula. So the fact that there is a formula is not surprising or a problem in and of itself. Even the specific formula that's used here, rebellious teenage girl coming-of-age adventure, is fine and even enjoyably tweaked a bit. It's just that the formula stands out to me so much with this movie. Maybe it's because of how specifically similar it is to some other Disney films I really like. Maybe it's just the style of writing or the mood I was in the first time I watched the movie. I really don't know. But anytime I watch this film, I'm always acutely aware of the non-creative reasonings as to why basically all the story choices were made. Before I give you my rating recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying Moana or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Moana 3.5 out of 5 paws. It takes a tried and true Disney formula, applies a new Polynesian coat of paint to it, and somehow makes it work. The cultural elements and beautiful animation help ensure that this ship never sinks into the seas of its own familiar story repetition. I would recommend Moana to fans of Disney animation. I know that's a broad recommendation, but this is one of those films that'll have broad appeal thanks to its utilization and slight tweaking of a well-worn coming-of-age formula. It'll probably seem familiar to you at points, but unless you really dislike revival-era CG animation or songs, then you'll be hard-pressed not to enjoy this one. If you liked Moana, I would recommend Raya and the Last Dragon. Like Moana, this film focuses on a teenage girl who sets out on a journey in search of a mythological entity in the hopes of saving her homeland from a curse. Raya is Southeast Asian rather than Polynesian, and she's looking for a dragon rather than a demigod, but this action-filled non-musical is a strong recent addition to Disney's growing pile of coming-of-age stories. If you'd prefer to stick with a musical, you might want to watch Encanto. This is another culturally grounded coming-of-age tale, this time set in Colombia, that has a big dose of fantasy and strong family themes. The animation style is pretty similar to Moana's, and both films feature songs penned by Lin-Manuel Miranda. And if you liked the spiritual connection with nature elements of this film, you should check out Pocahontas. Released at the midpoint of Disney's Renaissance era, this is another coming-of-age story about an adventurous girl who rebels against her father's wishes. This story is largely driven by a romantic plotline, but it too features some cute animal sidekicks and also highlights the importance of nature. Grandmother Willow sprouted, so Grandmother Stingray could swim. Alright, couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Moana? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite Disney movie without a romantic subplot? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.